I'm Tony Grisoni. I'm a screenwriter, filmmaker. I work on feature films. I work on TV drama. It's like telling a story or a joke or a piece of music or a poem or whatever, and to find, oh, it's working with someone who comes from a totally different place, especially if the metaphors, the images, the detail of your story are true to where you come from. I think things go wrong when you take something and you scrub it, and make it nice and clean because you think, oh, I want this to sell in Poland, for example. So I have to second guess the Polish people like they're one thing to make sure they're going to understand what I'm telling them. This is such a wrong way of going about things. So the exciting thing, as I say, is when the detail remains true from where the idea comes. I mean, it's interesting because it was all about discovery, all about group work as well. Writers tend to be isolated. They tend to be alone. And for a lot of writers to discover that there is some real benefit from being in a small community of writers where you share projects, you work on one another's project, the project returns to you. It's very different from a writer's room, for example, where there would be a showrunner or similar, and all the writers in the room are writing to that particular vision. It's very different to say, okay, here are all these writers, they all have their individual projects, but we're going back and forth, we're discussing one another's projects. We're, sometimes a writer will take someone else's project and present it as best they can, and you discover lots of things. And it's very heartening when people do that, because you can see how they want someone else's project to really succeed in some way. You have a very strong, powerful dynamic between writers and broadcasters, or perceived dynamic, which is very difficult to disrupt. Partly because it's great. It's very much an economic one. Writers rely upon broadcasters to fund their work, to back their ideas, to make things possible. Broadcasters for sure rely on writers to produce material. So it's not always an easy relationship. It's about where does the power lie, and that can be very difficult. So you have to be very aware of that. The idea was to get writers and broadcasters in the same room together, which is a very interesting, curious, unheard of idea, to put these people together, and I think for the broadcasters to perhaps get a different understanding, or an understanding of what writers do and how they work. And the ambition was for the writers to meet broadcasters when it wasn't such a tense atmosphere. You weren't meeting broadcasters because you were selling your project. You were meeting them in a more relaxed way. So that was the ambition. At the end of the workshop, we had what we called a presentation, where the writers presented their projects. Now, we did everything we could to avoid the word pitch, because if you say pitch to writers, they will pitch, and they're all very experienced writers. They're all very good writers, and they spend a lot of time pitching their projects. The problem with pitching is that when you pitch, you're selling, and in order to sell, you may have to avoid more difficult things in the drama. also these projects were just beginning. This is a week. How can you possibly pitch a project you've just started to identify? So we avoid the word pitch, and we hope the word presentation would do something different. It didn't really. They were still doing very much the same thing, because there they are standing in front of an audience which is full of broadcasters. So there was a tendency to go back on that railway track. So that needs to be addressed and changed, and we have to find a better way through. But we will, I'm sure.